Good morning. How are you, 10-2? You thought you were going to have a day free of me, but here I am. I hope by now you figured out your do now question. And now we're moving on to your next assignment, which is that you should have already received a paper from Mrs. B with 4 different blocks on it that you're going to use your book, or you did use your book for, to fill out. So it's a flow chart. And the flow chart goes along with sections in your book. And basically you are figuring out what caused what, caused what, caused what. So it's a flow chart of events. And it has to do with how society changed during the medieval times, the medieval ages, starting with climate changes and what that did to agriculture and what that did to the population, and then what that did to organizations and society. So once you have done that, or if you've already done it, so either pause now so that you can take about a half hour to do that, or you've just already done it and now we can go over the answers. So in your first block, or the box on your worksheet, one of the first things it talks about is the fact that the food supply increased during this time period. And what that will do then, of course, is create better health for people. And then, of course, it will help to increase population. But why did the food supply increase? So look at your paper, see if you have anything that matches up with this. There was a warmer climate. So globalized warming occurs in cycles, and it kind of always has. Our Earth has gone through these warming cycles. During the Middle Ages, from about 800 to 1200, and that's hundreds of years, but during that time period there was an increase in average temperature. So a lot of soil, particularly up in the north, those regions where we saw some of the Nordic invaders come in, or the Vikings, that were being pushed out of their land and coming into Europe, well, now they're staying there and they can farm further north because their land is becoming unfrozen. And so you can farm or cultivate on more land. Horses are now going to be used instead of oxen. They can last longer than oxen. They're stronger animals and they can move faster as well. And they're also going to invent a new type of harness to put on the horses so that when it pulled the plow, it was more effective. And that made a very big difference. 3-field systems, this is something that actually will be used, a system that will be used well into close to current day. A lot of countries use this system of you had 3 areas of farming, 3 areas to farm on, and one of them every year you didn't farm on, but then you rotated which one you didn't farm on. And that allowed the soil to regain its nutrients. It also leaves 1/3 of the land not used every year too, so it's a little bit of a waste as well. But that was a 3-field system, and that's that. All right, next, because now we have more food, this will actually ignite something called the commercial revolution. Now, the commercial revolution was when there was more produced than the people needed, so they could sell it and they could bring it to festivals and things like that. All right, so there's an increase in trade. So not only are you producing farm goods for either your own home and your family or your village, you are now taking your excess and you're bringing it to other places and trading it. There's something called a guild that will develop at this time, and guilds exist today too, similar to maybe a unionized worker, where their rules are sort of set for everyone who creates or works on a certain type of product, so that everyone does it the same way. There are certain standards in building a certain type of thing, or in working on a certain type of trade, a shoemaker or an iron worker, things like that. So again, they'll establish rules and regulations. Now we'll see fairs and festivals. There's more people, there's more trade, so people come together, right? So this is the beginnings of things like Renaissance festivals. Pennsylvania does a big Renaissance fair every year. New trade routes because of the Crusades, and also because of new products to trade. They will open up new places to trade new people and new routes to bring your goods along to trade. Business and banking will improve. Things like standardized exchange rates, as far as everyone's going to sell a certain amount of wheat or a certain amount of leather or something like that for the same exchange of other products. So it's more standardized. It wasn't just barter anymore. And foreign coins will also be established. So these would be pictures of a guild on the top and a fair and a festival. All right, commercial revolution will now create changes in society. Towns will now need workers. Populations in towns are going to grow into cities. This is called urban life or city life. There are terrible living conditions. The more people that lived in one area, the more concentrated that area became of people, and more diseases would spread more quickly. Even things like human waste or animal waste, things like that, would sit around and cause diseases and things like that. Jobs will become more available for peasants. So peasants and serfs that were for so long tied to their land and were worked basically as slaves, and they were bound to their land because they always owed more and more to their landowners. Now they're able to sort of barter for new jobs because jobs are now being created in cities. And when there's new jobs available, these peasants and serfs could, they could leave their land and say, see you later, peace out, and they could go find a job. All right, so new social class is now created out of like a triangle or a pyramid of all of those social classes. Merchants and craftsmen now are going to find their way in there, and depending on how well they did, they'd be closer to the top. And this is officially the end to the feudal system, where a wealthy landowner owned lands. Everybody on that land owed them something, essentially. So that will end. Crowded cities. It's a picture there, and this is one of my favorite all-time books from when I was a kid. And I'm not going to go into it now because I'm not there. You can't get the full effect of my storytelling. But if you've ever seen this picture before or the front cover of this book, you probably, hopefully, enjoyed it as much as I did. And this was called Caps for Sale. So I'll talk about this when I come back later on in the week. All right, society changes and there's a revival of learning. The Crusades, we talked about the fact that during the Crusades, people went to new lands. And so new lands, new people, new contacts, bringing back with them things that they learned. And there was a revival of Greek knowledge, reading Greek texts and things like that. The Muslims in Spain, which we will also call the Moors later on, they could translate Greek texts and Latin texts into Arabic, which was huge. So now you saw a lot of the maybe algebraic and scientific-based books that were written in Arabic translated into European languages. Universities will now develop as there's an increase in learning, and now literature is written in something called vernacular. If you saw this in your book, vernacular means your own home language, not just something common like a Latin, Greek, or even Arabic. It's a language that is more common just to your particular group of people. And this is architecture that we see. The bottom picture is of the inside of a building in Spain, in southern Spain, which the buildings are built very much in the architecture of Muslims and the Islamic architecture, which we talked about in our last unit. And that is that. So I hope you're having a good time, and I know you're going to do really well in your next assignment that Mrs. B is going to give you. Have a good day. I'll see you on Friday.